Well, the holiday season is upon us, and among other things, it means I've been slacking off a bit on the Louisville Cycling Podcast. But just because I'm a slacker, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have something to listen to. So I'm replaying a previous episode this week, and it's with two of the community's biggest influencers, Curtis Tolson and Bob Bobrow. If you've already heard it, well, you're sure to hear something you missed the first time around. And if you haven't, well, you're in for a treat. Buckle up that helmet strap and clip in. It's time for the Louisville Cycling Podcast, the podcast that celebrates the people, rides, and events that make Louisville and the surrounding area a great place to ride a bike. Welcome to this episode of the Louisville Cycling Podcast. Now, before we get started, I want to remind you that Bike to Beat Cancer is just around the corner, coming up on September 14th. You can use the code LCP for a free registration to the event. And while you're in the mood for ride registrations, go ahead and jump over to register for Harvest Homecoming as well. You've heard countless guests on this show talk about the support Bob Peters and Clarksville Schwinn has given the cycling community. You can pay it back by registering to ride in Harvest Homecoming on October 5th. Links for both events are included in the show notes. Tonight, we have Louisville cycling royalty in the house with Curtis Tolson and Bob Bobrow. And even though you might not think you need it, this episode is for every rider out there. We're talking about cycling fundamentals and group riding etiquette. Now, Curtis is a multinational and world champion, and Bob is the ride captain extraordinaire in the Louisville area, responsible for the development of untold numbers of cyclists. This is an episode you'll want to listen to so you can make sure you're not that guy or that girl on the next training ride. Oh, and one more thing I need to mention. This is the very first episode of the Louisville Cycling Podcast to earn an explicit rating. So put grandma to bed and be forewarned. Toward the end of the episode, there are a few colorful words that help to paint the picture. All right, let's get to it. I started this chat with Curtis and Bob by reviewing our group credentials. Before we get started, I think it's really important to build credibility by pointing out that between the three of us at this table, we have over 40 national championships and 2 world titles. So
that's right.
I just think it's important for us to point that out right at the beginning of the show.
And one fourth place national.
And one top 5, right?
That's
the
right.
top 4. Yeah. So we're talking about 2 important but often overlooked aspects of cycling. We're going to talk about cycling fundamentals and pack etiquette. And I want to start by talking about fundamentals a little bit. And Curtis, I'll start with you. You often say that cycling is like many other sports and that there are certain fundamentals that all cyclists should master. So what are a few of those fundamentals you talk about?
Well, to add to that, the difference in not knowing the fundamentals when you're racing bicycles versus playing basketball or football or any other game is people get hurt when you don't understand what you're supposed to be doing. It's not that complicated. There's just a few basic things that everyone needs to know. I mean, and everything kind of builds on that and flows off of that. And, just spacing in the group, where to look, be predictable, and, everyone is everyone else's eyes and ears at all times. So, if you see something out of the norm, a football bouncing out into the road, a car coming, dog, whatever, communicate, number one. Could be a pothole. I'm pretty famous for telling people to point holes out.
Point that shit out.
Yeah.
So it's not hard, but when people don't spend the time to learn it and then show up on a ride, they get a little over their head. They do, they pull off the wrong direction with the wind or something like that, and they stack 10 guys, and, most of the time it's no big deal, but it could be, and the stakes are pretty high. I mean, my wife's got a broken neck to show for it.
Now, outside of group riding, are there just individual fundamentals about riding a bike that people need to know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different topic if we're talking about group etiquette or basic riding skills.
Well, let's talk about basic riding fundamentals first.
Well, it's where to look. So, what are you looking at when you ride? How do you pick up danger? How do you pick up, not necessarily danger, but how do you execute a corner? How do you draft? How do you clip? It could be as simple as how do you clip into a cleat, into a pedal. I mean, there's all kinds of different levels that people need to learn. And when you're going out by yourself, you need to get proficient at starting, stopping, going around corners. Being able to look behind you while you're maintaining a straight line is kind of a big deal because, that way you can look around and pick up on these things without swerving when you do it. So, there's some basic skills that you should master before you show up on one of these group rides.
Now, Bob, you organize a lot of rides and you do a lot of coaching with individuals. What are the things that you look at and really train people to be able to do just in terms of basic bike fundamentals?
Well, once somebody conquers the basics Curtis said about riding, being able to clip in, pedal, shift gears, brake, operate their bicycle in a safe manner by themselves, I think the first thing we do or would teach someone is how to sit on someone's wheel. That's one of the most basic. I mean, and you don't do that the first time on a group ride. You don't show up to a group ride without having learned how to draft. And it's not hard. As Curtis said, you got to know where to look. You don't want to be staring down at the wheel in front of you. And you get used to, you should start following someone like one of us old folks in here. We ride steady, we ride smooth, and then that person can just get comfortable sitting in the draft because most people listening to this would understand, but depending on the speed, the weather conditions, everything else, you can save between, 10% to up to 30 or 40% of your energy if you're on a draft. And that's what makes group riding so dynamic and so different than any other sport. I mean, a bunch of runners can get together and they'll spur each other on a little bit through motivation. You're a little competitive. You might do your best time when you go out and do a 5K with 5,000 people if they get out of your way. But it really doesn't make you any faster. But the synergy that goes on in a group, a group of 10 old guys like us can go along at 25 miles an hour for a long time if we know what we're doing. Once you learn how to draft, and get comfortable with that. And then you learn how to trade pulls and those sorts of things. And then at that point, you may be ready to try a group ride.
If you look at fundamentals, what are like the top, like 2 or 3 fundamentals, and what are things that people can do when they're out by themselves to practice to get good at those things?
Well, I would say practicing for group riding, you need to be at least with one other rider. You need a wheel to follow. Now, you can dumb it down and just have one person, or you can jump in the deep end with 50 or whatever. But basically a basic understanding of what formations people ride, what they're kind of used for, and kind of the cliff notes are, if you're in a group of 6 riders, 5's kind of the break even point from when you could go from a single file line to a double rotating kind of formation. And that really confuses the hell out of people a lot. If you have 5, you're kind of spending so much time accelerating and decelerating that it starts to lose its efficiency. With 4, it just goes out the window. So if you might see at the end of a tour stage 4 guys come to the line rotating in what would be a double line, but the gas is completely turned off. They're going 22, 23 miles an hour, which for those guys is like they're taking a nap. And it's just a gentleman's agreement that, hey, we're not going to start really screwing around with each other till we get close enough to race for the win. And if we start really getting tactical too far from the line, then, we're all going to get caught. We're going to get nothing. So that's kind of generally the scenario that you'll see that in a race situation. Now, when they're going hard, 4 guys are always going to be in a single line. So, back to our group rides, when things start splitting up, or even like the Tuesday Night Worlds, you got 4 guys or less. It's always going to be single file. 5, you can rotate for short distances. But you're kind of, we're riding over our head until we get settled. Then we're probably going to switch to a single. if we're like, okay, this is going the distance and we've got to do this for a while. Single's still going to be, especially if it's 5 strong guys that can take 20, 30-second pulls and get recovered and do it again. You get over 6, then it starts to get really efficient to do the double line. And then the other thing that trips everyone up is when you're doing the double line and even the single line is what direction does the thing go? Which direction do you pull off and why? So, people hear me all the time just hammering them about always pull off into the wind. And the reason you're doing that is twofold. When you're dropping back, you're providing a shelter for everyone on the downwind side of you because you're buffeting the wind. You've let off the gas, but you're still blocking the wind. And the other reason is everyone's going to be stacked up on the downwind side of you. So if you go away from the wind, you're going to stack everyone, which is a pretty common mistake. And I see pretty experienced guys do that still. So, and then the other thing is, I would say when you're doing a 2-up, it's not really a rotation, it's a double pace line, and you're just going to ride until you feel like you're done, and then split and let everyone come up the middle, and each of the 2 riders that have just finished are going to go back either side that they were on to the back and rejoin. That's a non-competitive formation, and the biggest mistake people make there is they get competitive and they do a thing we call a half wheel hell. So, and so if you're riding with someone and they're, there's a little ego thing going on and they're keeping their, and you try to get up even with them and they accelerate a little bit. And then next thing you know, you're going 25 in this. So, it's that would be probably the thing they do most.
Yeah. It's no longer a conversation pace at that time. And the wind, Curtis just went from preschool to college level in about 2 minutes there because, the truth is every single ride, I can almost say every group ride I've ever been on, somebody is rotating the wrong way or those sorts of, we think that they're basic. I guess it's really pretty advanced. The older I get, the more sensitive to where the wind is.
Well,
I am.
Efficiency. You get lazy. And you get upset when you either get endangered or someone causes you to do extra work.
Right.
That's where the angst comes from.
Right, and it can be dangerous. But just show after you've mastered sort of the basics. You can ride your bike confidently. You can ride 2s, 3s, practice that stuff in the park or somewhere where, it's pretty safe to do. Then you show up and there's 20 guys, 30 guys, girls, guys. I think the number one rule there is listen and watch and see what people are doing. If you just mimic what's going on out there, most of the time you're going to be all right. You've got to understand, and I'm sure you were going to get into this, but there are different rides. Mm-hmm. It used to be when I posted a ride back in the day. How many times will we say that tonight? People knew what they were getting into, and it was, it's just full gas. Yeah. We had a warm up area, and then we had a rotation area, and even. But
it wasn't cowboy. It was we're going to do this for this amount of time, and we'll regroup at X position, X spot.
And people around here know if I put on a ride, it's going to be X. If I say we're going to do this, that's pretty much what we're going to do. Used to be I could enforce that all on my own. Ride up to somebody, hey. Now it's like I'll send my son to do it, or maybe Curtis to do it, or whatever. But watch what the people are doing and do what they're doing. It's the organizer's ride.
Well, the truth is we've become what we used to call the estrogen ride.
Yeah.
So we can't control anything.
Right. But it's their ride. Don't go on a ride and be the one person who's doing something that's out of place. If they're riding 2-up and they're having conversation, that's what you do. Yeah. If they're rotating, you can rotate, or you can sit on the back, which is another thing I'm sure we'll get into is what you're doing back there. But go with the flow. I mean, that's the whole point. It's a flow. It's a big flow out there on a group ride.
I did want to go back and ask one question about pace lining and pulling off into the wind. When you're in the single pace line and the wind kind of shifts on you, how do you indicate to the rest of the group that, hey, I'm going to pull off this other way now?
Well, if you're the leader, the biggest cue is where is the person behind you sitting? If they're sitting directly behind you, you have the option. If they're staggered, you need to go away from where they're staggered. If they're sitting directly behind you and you got a left turn coming up, you probably want to go off to the right just because you're going to give them, one of the basic principles of pace line riding and breakaway riding is the most important guy in the line is the guy sitting second. He's the guy that's got to pull you next. So if you do something to break his momentum and the people behind him's momentum, you pretty much undone all the work you just did. So you just want to give them the cleanest shot through a corner or the cleanest line past you with the shelter.
And of course, when you're riding in a pace line, the one thing that always comes up is when you're pulling through to the front about maintaining the effort or the speed or the pace. What are you doing when you pull through?
Well, your wattage output has to go up, but your relative speed across the ground should be the same unless the conditions in the road are changing. If you start to pull and the road goes downhill, then you're going to accelerate just like you would if you were alone. But if you really dramatically what we call jacket, then I don't even know where that came from.
That's a great term.
Yeah. So, and that means it's a sudden, sharp acceleration, and it doesn't have, if everyone's riding, along tempo zone and below, it's not that big a deal. But when everyone gets into their threshold and VO2, a little acceleration can bust that thing up pretty bad, and then you end up with people in the middle of the line deciding they're not going to go through, and then the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
So as you're a rider and you're in a group that's in process of falling apart, I think yesterday you said coming apart like a prom dress. If you're in a line and things are coming apart, what is your role? What do you do? How do you reestablish? What are you looking for when things start to fall apart, and how you're reacting?
Well, it depends on why it falls apart. If you're in a line and you're in the back, there's not a lot you can do other than. And what's your objective? Are you trying to blow the ride apart? I mean, is it a race? Are you trying to split the group? In that case, you do. That's a different question. If you're trying to keep it together for whatever reason, whether you're just being a nice guy or whether there's some tactical reason in a race that you would want the group to stay together, and you're the strong guy, you got a couple options. You can either just dumb yourself down and ride at the pace of the group, or if you really want to help the group, you take longer pulls at a speed they can do. So that's what I would do is just pull longer if I was the strong guy there and not necessarily accelerate it.
What's one other really basic fundamental that cyclists need to master, and what's a kind of drill you can do on your own to help you learn how to do that skill?
For group riding?
Or just in general, just because again, you got to be pretty good as an individual rider before you can be a good group rider.
Global awareness. It's amazing how blissfully blind and deaf people are, that they don't see things, they never saw things that happened, just unaware. You need to be, you don't have to be keyed up. You need to be paying attention.
Right. When I was in the Navy, I was in airplanes, and they teach you to scan. And you scan your instruments all the time. In the car, we just get there and we occasionally, if we set it on cruise, we may not even look at our speedometer. But, you've got to pay attention. And so when you're riding, you have to be very aware, and you should have some sort of a scan. It doesn't have to be mechanistic, but you need to know what's going on around you. And you need to know if there's a side street that's got, a car could be coming out, just pay attention. As far as the mechanics of driving a bike, I mean, there's all sorts of, I guess, drills you could do. You could practice cornering. You could do all that kind of stuff. But I don't know that that's for the average person. I mean, that's going to go out and do a group ride. You probably don't need to do that sort of thing. I mean, you do need to know how to use your brakes smoothly. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody grab a handful of brake. That's a little alarming. You need to know how to shift gears, those sorts of things. But It's not difficult. It's like riding a bike, right? You never forget. I mean, you learn to ride a bike when your kid's the same thing. So, but it changes a ton when you get into a group. And we could talk here for a long time, and we'd never get into all the scenarios where you've got to pay attention, and pay attention for safety wise and pay attention for etiquette wise. It truly is a group effort. You know, Kurt, they call it a pace line. I think if cycling started now, they'd call it a power line, because the truth is the person on the front should always be riding the same wattage, no matter who that person is. That's how you maintain it. It's an effort line. It's not, pace is deceiving if you use that as a definition, because like Curtis said, going downhill, you're going to be flying. Going uphill, you're going to be going slower. So all of you, all the power guys out there and girls who have their meters, you can look, and it should, when you get on the front, if you're in a consistent line, it should be roughly the same power when you're on the front of the thing. So be predictable when you get in the group. That's a fundamental.
Describe for me what you'd consider to be a scary rider in a group. I mean, what do you see that says, man, I'm stay away from that guy?
By name?
Well, as long as it's not my name, you're good to go.
Someone who is erratic, that doesn't, you don't want to move quickly unless there's some sort of an emergency. You want to be predictable. You want to. It's very much a flow thing, like I said before. Someone who just doesn't seem to. I'm thinking of someone in particular who doesn't seem to hear well or see well.
That's a lot of us now.
It is, yeah. But they're not. Like Curtis said, you've got to pay attention, and because it's a scary place if or
someone that puts herself in a spot that is. They don't have a way out. They're overlapped the wrong way. They're in a box, and they're putting themselves in a spot where they have no options.
Right, and then you've got the other folks that are the consistent jackers, as Curtis used that term. It's descriptive. They go through the line, but you're going through nice and smooth in a rotating line, and the next thing you know, the guy or girl, usually it's a guy. I hate to admit that, but it's true. Usually it's a guy, they're 10 yards ahead of you. It's irritating, especially if you're going hard. If you're just rolling along, it's just irritating. But safety-wise, stay away from the people who just don't seem to be paying attention. And you can talk to them. That's another nice thing. I mean, we are able to talk. And when you were asking Curtis what would you do if the ride's blowing up? Well, if you don't want it to blow up, you can also talk and nicely say, hey guys, let's get this back together, or something not as nice.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. It's like, hey guys, let's get this back together. That's exactly how it goes down, right?
That's the translation. When you Google translate that, that's what it comes out as.
Now, when you are, looking at each other as riders from a fundamental standpoint, what's one thing that stands out to you most about the other rider here?
Well, Bob is just Mr. Consistent. He's like the Energizer Bunny. When we raced together, he didn't really have a giant weapon, but he had a lot of
little weapons,
and he would just body punch you into submission over the course of a day.
And with Curtis, I mean, he's tactically not sound. He's tactically astute. He in a line, he's never the guy that screws the line up. He's never the guy that's riding too hard. That's another thing you'll see. You've got a lot of folks, the guys that we're calling jackers or this sort of thing, a lot of times they tend to have something to prove.
Well, we just forgot what it feels like to feel that good.
Yeah, well, that's true. But we didn't do that. We, the only time back when we would have those old rides where it would be, okay, here's the plan. we're going to warm up through this part. And then there were certain points in the ride where it's full on. And we'll rotate as hard as the strongest guy can rotate. And at that point, it's a measuring contest. I mean, but it shouldn't be like that. And so you'll never see Curtis on a chilly group ride where we're having conversation, half wheel somebody, pull through the line too fast, do anything like that. And, it's another thing when we have a new rider. If somebody says to me, hey, I'm uncomfortable, and it doesn't happen too often. Most people just kind of follow along and figure it out. But I'll tell them, follow somebody like Curtis. You can learn just by watching. He's smooth, and he's not really going to make mistakes. You might hear him voice some concerns at time, and he might voice some concerns about what you're doing. But, that's how you're going to learn is if it's pointed out to you that, hey, you just screwed that up.
It's not normally the new guys that we beat up. It's the guys we know that should know better.
Yeah, that's true too.
To get it to worse.
Well, and when you think about, those fundamentals of pack riding, what's the one thing that you see most people doing that they shouldn't be doing because they should know better, but still annoys the hell out of you?
I mean, there's not one thing. It's, the whole, every ride we've been on, the last 3 rides, someone's hit a hole and had a flat, So I think people get lazy about calling stuff out. And, it's a balance. I mean, you don't need to call every, pimple out, but at the same time, just if you look at something in the road and if somebody hits that wrong, it could cause them to fall, point it out. And if, and the other thing is don't wait till you're 6 inches from it to figure it out. It's much better to just, make a 3-degree line change over 100 meters and get around it than it is to make, a pretty nasty little flick right at the end, So again, smooth and steady is kind of what you're looking for because we're all talking, we're all telling jokes, on these conversation rides, and we're not maybe totally plugged in sometimes, and that's when it goes wrong.
Yeah, and another thing on that, Barry, is remember you're with a group. If you're out by yourself and you want to go down this downhill and risk your well-being, that's fine. Go ahead, do it, but don't do it on a group ride. Don't do it on one of my group rides, at least. I mean, again, and we'll probably get into this. There are different group rides with different rules, but you've got 30 people behind you, and you showing off that you can go corner fast, you can go downhill. It doesn't make a lot of sense because you're going to get someone to go over their head. You've got to remember what you do influences someone, and that someone may.
Especially ripping it on a blind turn on an open road kind of thing.
Right. And you see people do that kind of dumb stuff all the time, and they're not doing it maliciously. I mean, it's fun to ride a bicycle. It's fun to do that stuff, but you got to tone it down when you're in a group because you might make someone else get over their head. They're trying to follow you. They're trying to be part of the group, and they might make a mistake. It's just not a good plan at that point. The same sort of idea. Intersections. Alone, deal with them how you deal with them. We're supposed to stop at stop signs. We're supposed to stop at stoplights. A lot of states have modified those rules. We all know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense a lot of times. But when you're in a group, you got to do with it. You don't want to, that light's turning, and you see it turning, and then you go for it because you got 30 people behind you. You might do that with you when if somebody think of it this way, if you've ever said to a friend of yours, hey, follow me to so-and-so in a car, you know how you got to pay attention for them, you got to wait, you can't, you kind of do the same thing. And you don't want to do it just like you're out there by yourself.
Well, and when you're on the front, I've always considered that you're kind of the eyes for the group at that point. And if the group can't get through, then you probably shouldn't try to squeak through.
Exactly. You're you're not a funeral procession. They're not going to stop for everyone behind you. So it's like anything else. It's if you're out on a group ride because you want the benefit of being with a group. You want to talk to people. You want that extra speed. You want the little extra adrenaline you get of being with a group. So don't just take from the group. Give back to the group. I mean, it's I don't know. It's kind of socialist.
Yeah. Well, there we go. It's a socialist podcast now. So I know there's a lot of fundamentals on the bike. Are there off the bike fundamentals that people need to know about? Like, are there nutritional fundamentals? Are there preparation fundamentals? What other kind of fundamentals do people need to know about who want to go out and ride a bike well?
Well, the biggest thing for the group rides we do is be prepared to fix a flat tire. I mean, we've had multiple group rides, and it's something that everyone's going to need to do, and it's for your own good. I mean, you're going to get stranded at some point and, have to call someone or call Uber or whatever. But, changing a tire, something simple as changing an inner tube, turns into kind of a fiasco sometimes. And, sometimes it's just what it is. But, I would say be self-sufficient. Have your own CO2s, have your own tubes. And if you don't know how to do it, say, hey, man, I'm not very good at this. Can somebody help me so we can get going faster? And that's, as a new rider, I would just also say, hey, man, I've not done this much. Give me. I'm open to helping. Help me out a little bit if you can. And that automatically takes the heat off of them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pressure when 30 people are waiting for you and you don't know how to really change a tire, and kind of take a step back from that. When you get on your bike, kind of make sure everything's working before you go out. Make sure you don't have thread showing through in your tires. And I mean, there's a very famous story in a small circle of folks about some gentleman who had a flat on Goshen Hill.
I know the story. I was going to tell it.
and
Hit 25 patches in his tube.
So we all stop and wait. And because that's another thing with a group ride, we stop. Contrary to some people's popular belief recently that we leave people on our rides, we don't.
At least not on purpose.
Not on purpose. So, but you got to understand, again, it comes back to respecting the group and giving back to the group. Well, this person on Goshen Hill, we all stop. Everybody stops. It's like, okay, let's fix that tire. He pulls the tube.
It looked like a quilt. I swear to you.
And we're like, see ya.
Yeah, JT's like, we're out. We're not waiting for you.
We just left because it's like, you're kidding me. I mean, you just don't do that. And you do see people, and I've done this before. I mean, I've had I've braked hard, and you skid the back tire a little bit and you wear some stuff off, and you'll get a little wear spot there over time where you'll get a couple cords throwing through. And I've been guilty of that, but don't do it.
Now, should we run a contest to see who could name the person with 25 patches on their tube?
Oh, we should both name him.
Yeah, we could both name him. I bet you there are others that could name him.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big ride.
Let's just say that the jersey he has right now looks a lot like that tube.
Yeah, it does.
When you think of skills and fundamentals, that's one thing, but let's shift a little bit and talk a little bit more about group etiquette. And what are the kinds of things that riders need to know about etiquette when you're riding in a group?
I think the biggest...
We kind of went through a lot of it.
The biggest thing is to know the ride you're showing up to. Okay, let's just go through. In Louisville, there are some standard weekly rides. Okay, we'll start with the first day of the week, and these are the rides I know of. I know that the Louisville Bicycle Club and Southern Indiana Wheelman, they put big group rides on too. But I'm talking about the rides that are typically posted to the Purple Rides group. Tuesday Night Worlds is the first ride of the week. It's a race. It's a race.
So one etiquette thing I would add there is, and this has happened a couple times, if you get dropped, nobody cares if you jump back in. But if the race is splitting and you jump back in the second group and then go to the front and take a hero pull, weld the thing back together and get dumped again, A, you didn't help yourself train much, and B, you kind of screwed the race up for the guys that were interested in racing. So if you come, once you get dropped and you get back in, use it as a motor pacing session. And you know, if you want to sprint at the end, great, fine. But just don't interfere with like a gap that's happens to be there.
Don't affect the results. You know.
Now, what if you're the person who's causing a gap? What is your responsibility to the rest of people in the group when you're on the rivets and you're like, I can't hold this wheel?
Well, I mean, it depends on the situation. You know, if it's everybody behind you, you want them to succeed, then, you know, you likely should, you know, signal to the person behind you, you're cracking. And if you can pull out a little bit and, you know, maybe give them a push or let them.
Or drag them right up next to the person in front of you and let them draft you up to the wheel and then get out of the way. That would be number one.
And knowing you're getting ready to crack. I mean, before you get ready to crack, I mean, everybody knows what their limit is. And in a race like Worlds, when it's full on and, you know, you got to know what you can do and what you can't do more importantly sometimes. So, you know, if you're getting in, and this applies to all rides. I mean, this is one where if you could make a list of 1,000 questions. If you're in a line, don't go till you blow. You know, I mean, if you're racing, it's different. But if you're out there on a training ride and it's rotating and rotating and rotating, and it's like, you know, it's coming, you know, this is over my head, sit on.
Yeah, nobody minds.
Nobody minds. I mean, I don't understand why people are afraid to sit. I know it's ego. You don't want to submit. I mean, I lost that a long time ago.
So I ain't afraid to sit on it.
It doesn't matter. But, you know, don't stay in that line until you blow. That's the first thing. And usually typically if you're just, you know, it's typically not going to happen right as you're at the front, but it can, as you said. But, you know what your limits are. Sit on the back, which raises another topic is like, how do you sit on the back of a line? Mm-hmm. In my old age, when they rotate these days,
Bob's the gatekeeper.
I'm pretty much the gatekeeper because I know.
So everyone in front of Bob is in the rotation, and everyone behind him is typically in a single file line, just following him, and he's the one executing the moves as the people rotate.
Yeah, because you follow, you know,
which is a pretty hard spot.
Yeah, and you have to know what you're doing, but. You know, when you come back to the back, I mean, most people, it's, you know, in the rides that we do, no, it's like, okay, I'm out. Yeah. You know, and you tell somebody, and when you come into a rotating line, and I'm always telling people, if you're going in, you got to talk. You got to talk. Because if we've got 10 people rotating, you know, it's typically like me, it's, okay, I'm like, Will, Curtis, me. You know, I mean, I'm at least thinking two or three people ahead. And if all of a sudden it's Will, Barry, like, you know, it's
well, that's how you get
up.
Someone pulling in front of you,
right?
Because there's one more body in the line than you were expecting.
Well, and by the same token, when you're pulling out, if you wait to the last minute, then you've left somebody a gap they have to sprint to close.
Right. So you just ease off. Ideally, when you get to the back, you just slide off and you slide behind whoever's doing the gatekeeping job. And typically, I think there needs to be a gatekeeper in the back. And another thing you got to learn is sometimes it's easier to stay in the line if there's crosswind.
Yeah, you get more.
You get more shelter in the line than you do at the back of the line, because in the back of the line it's single file. And, you know, if we had the whole road and we could echelon, which means riding somewhat side by side to stay out of a crosswind, that wouldn't be as much of an issue. But
well, you've seen all these Tour de France stages where the big teams go to the front and ride a diagonal echelon, and everyone behind them is guttered, and they split the field.
Right. So you kind of. But, you know, you just get dropped a couple times. You'll figure that out.
Now, what happens when someone runs afoul of group etiquette?
Sometimes there's a crash.
If it's near-death experience, then, they get lambasted pretty hard.
Yeah. I mean, everybody reacts differently. But, I mean, like Curtis and I are pretty different personalities. You know, he's a little more volatile than I am.
You think?
But the truth is, I mean, on a ride, I'm almost as likely to use the F word or whatever. There's just something about when you sit yourself on that bike seat.
Carbon fiber induced Tourette's.
Yeah, you get a little personality change. I mean,
you're under pressure. You get a little bit scared, or you get a little bit amped up about this or that, whatever. You know, maybe you had a bad day the day or whatever. You know, who knows what you're taking into the ride.
And you can't, you know, it's windy. We're going 20, 30 miles an hour, so you can't hear. Oh, that brings up another thing. Don't wear freaking earpods, whatever the hell they are, headphones of any kind on a group ride. That is like, why are you on a group ride? Yeah. We're there to like socialize to some extent. And you're listening to music, just don't do it.
Well, you know, I was going to ask, one of the questions I had here was, what's one of your most annoying pet peeves about someone in a group? And I think we just found that one.
Yeah, that's one of them. We want that, jackers.
Threadbare shorts right on their butt crack is one of mine.
Yeah.
Kevin was talking about that just the other day.
Yeah, I don't want to see your butt crack.
I'm not going to say which ride this was on, but we had one guy for like 5 different rides in a row had like a quarter-size hole right in his butt crack in his shorts and kept wearing the same shorts.
He's only got one pair, Barry. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, we saw his pair almost every ride. Etiquette is a little different from skill development. How do you learn what to do and not to do in a group?
Well, you know, through feedback or through, you know, just learning that, hey, that wasn't very efficient, what I just did. That cost me a lot of energy because I did X, Y, or Z, you know, and there's a much cleaner way to do it, so I'm going to start doing it the clean way.
Watch the people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, Bob, you organize a lot of rides. What do you feel is your responsibility as a ride captain, so to speak, in terms of monitoring and guiding a pack of riders?
Well, it starts with the post. I mean, when you post a ride, you should give some instructions.
It has to be as advertised.
Yes. We have.
Which I don't think Sunday was as advertised, by the way. I'm just going to say.
Well,
the ride captain didn't show up Sunday. He had a kind of a
the ride captain's
contamination issue.
Yeah, the ride captain's son went off to college on Thursday, and he partied a little bit on Saturday. But here's what the ride captain did, though. The ride captain posted the ride. Said what was going to happen. You got, you know, where to meet, you know, blah, 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 roughly what you're going to do. You know, if you're going to do intervals, you should say we're going to do intervals. If you're going to jack the hills, you know, advertise it and then ride it as advertised. So you start with the post. The next thing you do, you get there and you show up on time. As a ride captain, I'm always...
Bob doesn't wait much.
No, you leave. You leave on time. And that way, again, you know, you think about these people that show up 10, 15 minutes late, and, you know, and these rides that wait around, and then it's like the next person and the next person. It's like, you can't do that.
Yeah. And people get used to knowing, well, we're going to leave 15 minutes later.
Right, and that becomes the standard.
They get used to knowing you're not, too.
Yeah. And so I would say leave on time, which I always try to do, and then do the ride as you said the ride was going to happen. If you said you were going to do this, I mean, you know, for some reason, Curtis told the boys, some of the junior riders, one time he was going to call an audible on something. So they just thought that was the funniest damn thing they've ever heard. So I'll use that term. You do call audibles.
I called an audible Sunday. That's probably what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't want to ride the same route for the 80th time. So
you do occasionally call an audible. But I think the biggest thing is it's a micro. This is at a macro level ride. You got to, as a ride captain, you got to be predictable. People need to know what's going on. I mean, we roll out of Seneca Park. The people that meet at Seneca know exactly what we're doing. They know where we're going. If we don't, I mean, we give hand signals to somebody new. We get to River Road. It's just like people start rotating. You know, we rotate down River Road. It's a very standard kind of deal. We get to the bridge. We wait there. We're usually there a few minutes early. We wait for a few people and we're gone. And it's not hard, but people have trouble with the real simple things in life sometimes. So safety wise, I don't feel like if somebody's doing something consistently wrong, you'll definitely, say something to them. I've never had to, ban anybody from a ride, or like I would have the right to do that anyway. But, you watch out for the group and you pick routes. I mean, the boys, again, the juniors, why do we always do Indiana? I feel like I have to pick something safe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to ride the south end. We used to ride the east end. And honestly, I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is, part of it is definitely cell phones.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. You don't know what people are going to do. Part of it is I think people are more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is I'm getting older, so those things seem more scary than they used to seem. So I think you pick a route that is that's safe. In southern Indiana, you go over that East End Bridge, and it's the best.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily all the best terrain. You don't have the giant hills or anything like that.
You can find stuff over there.
Yeah, I try to avoid those now. Anyway.
There's nothing wrong with that terrain over there.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I don't feel, I mean, if somebody screws up and has a problem, I mean, it's on them. But I mean, I do the best. You do the best you can to set it up for success.
When you're out on a ride, what are some of the characteristics that kind of get you excited about someone who's on a ride versus some of the characteristics that make you wish they kind of wouldn't show up?
I mean, I don't care who shows up, and I don't get that excited about anyone showing up. I just want to go and then tell a few jokes and get a little exercise on those kind of rides. And then if it's in the season and you're training for something, then you want to try to get whatever it is you're trying to get done training wise out of it.
Well, and that's a good question. When you have so many different people on a ride, I imagine people have different goals at different times. How do you blend a ride with individual goals?
Well, if like Bob's been great about accommodating me when I have stuff to do, and I try to show up and do what Will's doing if it's going to help him at whatever time. And it doesn't always. Sometimes you're not going good enough to be able to do that, but if you can, it's kind of fun to help someone else do what they want to do. And I don't know, it's not like I don't get too excited. I mean, if Peter Sagan showed up or something, that'd be pretty cool. But short of somebody like that showing up, it's all a good guy. I mean, there's no one out there that I don't want to ride with. And, if they're doing something, then, hopefully you can train them out of it.
Now, Bob, how do you address that issue as again, as someone who organizes and plans rides? How do you handle the fact that there are people at different times that have different goals?
Well, I think a lot of that is there are different rides. So Tuesday Night Worlds, it's just a full on race. People can go get a super hard ride there. There are, I know there are other rides that are more racy. With my rides, and they've always been this way, even when we were going full gas, my rides have always been structured. They've never been willy-nilly. We're going to attack each other until we die. Well,
when we first started
riding, like in 1980, that's what we did, and we soon learned that this is stupid.
Yeah, we would beat each other so bad during the week that on Saturday we were all like needed life support.
Right. Somebody's always going to feel good, right? And so the people that I don't like, well, and I'm going to back up to when I used to care about going hard at certain times. The people that I didn't like to show up are the people who wouldn't follow the rules, people who wanted to turn every ride into a race. There are rides that are kind of designated. Oh, that Thursday night ride that they do, the fruit ride. That's their thing, but that's their thing. So that's
but it's not really like a race. It's more of a deathmatch 2000 trading pools kind of a thing.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't, until I showed up, they didn't really get tactical.
Okay. All right. So, but that's, and so what I try to do and the only people that I really have had to accommodate are people who ask me, hey, I want to do the group ride, and yet I want to get this done. So typically it's been either Curtis or the boys, or Tracy. But anybody could, hey, can we work this in? And you've seen what I've done, like with the boys, I'll try to do a short loop. Like Utica is really nice for getting a hill interval in, or maybe going all the way over to the bridge and then regrouping. And, again, talk about, communicating, but a lot of times I'll just not even go up the, and if I have that e-bike, I might give it a try. But, I might tell Will, because I know Will's typically going to be in the front, look, don't wait for me. When you come back around on the loop, I'll be coming the other way. So that's one way you can incorporate, or they'll regroup at the end of their effort. But when you're doing a 10-minute long effort, you might leave, you might be a long time regrouping. So you try to tell people, look, don't, if you're going to get dropped, flip it, go back around. But that's basically the way you try to do it. You're trying to find a short circuit, or if you're just doing hills, if the hill's only a couple minutes long, that's fine. Blast the hill, do that as your interval. Everybody else comes up at their own pace. We regroup and we move on. So, there are ways to do it, but a lot of it is just picking the ride that suits you. I mean, what we do now, my rides are typically just chill, have conversation, get exercise. I've got to ride my bike or I can't eat at all. I mean, so I think that's where most of us are now, and it's a lot of fun. But if you don't want to do that, if that's not the ride you want to be on, well, then find a ride that suits you, because there are all sorts of rides out there.
Now, do you plan rides differently depending on the time of the year, or are you pretty much kind of rolling into this chill mode most of the time?
Well, with the kids training, typically we were doing a lot more intervals earlier in the year, and then after Road Nationals, they switched back to doing a lot of their intervals on the trainer and on rollers, because they were thinking about doing some track racing and that kind of stuff. So they were doing their intervals independent of the rides. So yeah, our rides have just been chill. And I mean, with Will going off to school, from here until it gets too cold, and hell, we'll, obviously we ride in the cold, we do all that. So that'll probably be, I could probably drop conversation off the description. It just sort of implied now.
now, I do have to ask, how are you adjusting to Will being out of the house?
It's not easy. I mean, you know it in theory, it's probably going to be hard, but when it happens, it's tough. I mean, I think all of us in this room are probably much more attached to their kids than the last generation. And I don't know if it's good or bad sometimes, but, you get pretty attached to them. And Will's, as you know, Will's an only kid. And we ride together. We do all kinds of stuff together. But, I mean, for me, he went up Thursday, got into his room, all that good stuff, raced Thursday night. If he would have had a terrible set of races Thursday night, I probably would have gone home going, but he raced well.
Good.
So I think that as long as the phone calls are basically, I'm doing okay, I'm doing well. Once school actually starts, they're in a track camp right now, I think I'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I feel for you, because I know when because my son was an only son too, and we did a lot, and I coached him in football and things like that. When he went to school, I actually think I went through a little 3 or 4 month period of clinical depression. I mean, it was really tough.
Yeah,
it's not a fun thing. And I know, Madison was about the same age as Jake, and
well, she was different though. I knew when she got on the school bus to go to kindergarten the first day, I thought it was going to be real traumatic for her. She turned around and she goes, "See ya," and it's pretty much I knew she was gone.
Yeah, and I didn't think it wouldn't. I don't think it was very traumatic for Jake, but when you come home and it's like, pretty much all the activity in your house has been focused around him and his friends and people running through and stuff. And all of a sudden it's like,
yeah,
it's just a little different.
It's definitely different. And, I think, Will was much like Madison. I mean, he's ready to go to school and he's never had any issue. It was pretty smooth sailing through, it's, middle school is going to be terrible. There are obviously issues, but pretty smooth sailing. But the big difference was he was still under the roof when he went to those.
Well, I got news for you, Bob. They come back.
Yeah, I know. But I think as long as he's doing okay,
Well, he's not that far away.
He's not that far.
That makes it a little easier.
Yeah. But it's a big step. It's a bigger step than I imagined it would be.
It's a big step. Well, all right, we're going to shift. I got to do a lightning round, and I've got a special lightning round for the two of you. And my first question is, who has the biggest social media presence, Bob or Curtis? I know you're both old guys, so this is like
I don't really. I mean, I do Facebook. I don't do the other stuff.
I'm phasing out of social media.
Well, yeah.
All right, so I guess I win that one.
I got 2,200 in quotes friends.
Oh wow,
2,200.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, well, Curtis wins. Game
in your pipe and smoke it, boy.
Yeah. So, what's one cycling do-over you'd like to have?
My whole 17 to 25 age group trying harder and not being such a dick would be good. I mean, I there's a lot of regrets about, I think I kept myself out of a lot of opportunities and things like that just because I just wanted to crush, kill, destroy at any cost. And, knowing what I know now, it's not a positive thing,
Age has a tendency to mellow a little bit too.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, what about you?
Well, I'm going to stick with what I used to say. And this is when I was racing bikes that, you could tell me, hey, you would have won the Tour, but today you would hate the bicycle and you wouldn't be racing. I think I'd stay where I am now. I like riding. I mean, and I've been lucky enough to sort of, would I've liked to have some more medals or that stuff? Of course, everybody would, but I've made the best friends I've ever had in my life riding a bike. Curtis, one of them. You're one of them. It's great people. It's a great thing to do. So I wouldn't trade those medals or even a career riding a bike for enjoying it now and still being reasonably healthy at creeping close to that 6-0 number.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and truth is, the medals and $5 will get you a venti mocha at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said at the start, when we all share, in this table over 40 national championships and 2 world titles. So,
that's right. Yeah. So it just I guess no regrets. It's fun and it's like I said, it's just a great set of folks, and I get to the point now where I don't really like today I came home and it's like 98 degrees. I can go roll around the park by myself. I just got on the trainer. I was got on the trainer for 30 minutes just to get the exercise, do some stretching, that kind of stuff. So the group rides, that's what keeps me going now is going out with a group and shooting the shit with people. And it's just a lot of fun.
Well, one of the best things Bob shows you by example is it's about the process as it is as much about the results. It's doing it right and just being consistent means a lot.
So, Bob, what's your favorite Curtis story?
Oh man, the one I've told the most. I guess that's the way you measure it. I don't know. There's a lot of good Curtis stories. I'm trying to think of one where he didn't hit somebody.
Well, the next question is.
Here's there. I got one. I got one. This one's on me. All right, this one's on me. So
here we go.
We're at the Hall Road Race, and it was windy as hell that day. And I think we were racing the 1-2s, and we were over 35. We could have raced Masters, but because it was a road race, we couldn't double up. Right, so we did the 1-2 race, and we were still pretty competitive. And that thing was just it was just like this, a little more square than my phone, but it was up in northern Indiana, windy, and it came down to the end of the race. We shredded some people, but nobody was really getting away. So a couple of us, I think it was me and JT and I don't know who else, we started just kind of controlling the group from 5 or 6 miles out, probably halfway through this lap. And you go down and you take a right turn. I remember there's like a set of railroad tracks. You ran parallel to the railroad tracks, and you take another right turn. And then the last right turn, there's a school there, and it's the finish. So, I mean, it came pretty soon. It was JT was out, and it was down to me for like 2 miles. And I just put my head down and rode as hard as I could ride for 2 miles. And it's windy, and it's, I'm not really, all the things we'd said about paying attention, all of my focus was going into turning the pedals over and riding hard enough to keep this, this group off. And I figure, I mean, Curtis is almost 100% reliable, almost. And I just figure he's back there, and I'm just drilling this thing out. So I get to the last corner and I start going wide so the sprinters can go underneath me. And the next thing I know, I see Chester, who is wearing a pair of Hawaiian shorts and a Walmart purple helmet because he forgot his junk and hit the Walmart on the way in. Chester comes ripping through and just wins the race. And I'm like, Curtis isn't even there. And I'm like, what the hell? And he finally comes up, but the bottom line of the story is like, what happened to you, man? He goes, that's why you got a fucking neck, so you can turn around and see where I am. I'm like, really? I was up there really going hard, dude. So that was on me.
Yeah, no, I don't really remember what happened to me, but it was probably my fault. I just wasn't ready to hear it at the moment.
He was not ready to hear it.
Well, now it's your turn. What's your favorite Bob story?
Uh-oh.
Well, it's not a specific story. It was kind of, I mean, I have specific stories, but really the thing about Bob is when back to the days when we used to go out and race all the time in training, at some point the light bulb went on in his head where when I would attack him and go, 30 seconds of fury only to blow up a little while down the road, he finally, at some point he realized, I'll just stay steady and he'll come back. And once the day he figured that out, my life got really shitty for a while. Because I was like, anything I could do was just like, didn't matter. It was just like, you can jump as high as you want to, but gravity's pulling you back.
Yeah. I got another Curtis story. This was a good one. Curtis was a salesman for somebody at one point, and I was in the Navy. I was living in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And he came through there. I think it was Profile you were working for at the time.
Yeah, that was the East Coast tech rep.
Yeah. So Curtis comes through, and we had these mountain bike trails in our neighborhood. I mean, literally, I could ride out the back of my back door through my backyard, and the trail started there. And they were very urban trails, but it was just a big clump of woods. Mm-hmm. And sort of sandy, that Virginia soil out there, we're in Virginia Beach area, Chesapeake. And so we had a couple of places on that thing where we literally had a 2x4 crossing.
Across a big ass ditch.
Yeah, a big ass
like from
ditch.
me to Bob.
Yeah.
And as deep as, 3.5, 4 feet deep.
And so we got to where we would just come, and you just knew if you lined up right and you just went, you just went. Mm-hmm. So, and these trails are pretty technical, and so we're ripping through these trails, and we lost Curtis because, not because he's not fast enough, just because he didn't know where the hell he was going. I mean, he knew enough to follow, but you know how it is when you're braking, if you know you can flow. Mm-hmm. So we all got on the other side of this bridge and stopped. And he comes, and this thing would come out of a hard left turn, and he comes flying around that turn, and he's going really hard, and he sees this thing, and he looks at us like, what the fuck?
So what? Last Saturday, we had a little pool party for the kids going to college, and Will was there. And this is the synopsis of a Bob Rowe story. So we had these chairs, and they're metal frame chairs, and they have like a cloth, stretched cloth seat, So they've gotten, the sun is beating on them for 2 or 3 years, and they've kind of become dry rotted. Well, apparently Will sat in one of these chairs, and it started to rip. Mm-hmm. And so rather than taking the chair out of play, they put a towel over it and wait for the next sucker to come along. And that's a Bob Rowe-ism. I mean, I could tell you probably 50 stories, but this totally genetic. So I come along, sit down, I blow right through this chair, and they're all dying. And I was like, I just got Bob Rowe.
Yeah, but you didn't even know at first. The funny thing was he goes through the chair, and this is like, we pulled a couple on my dad before. My dad was like Curtis. He's the easiest going guy in reality, but he had that flair, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the kids were all watching him, and I'm watching because I knew what they did. And so we're all sitting there watching, and Curtis is like looking around. Yeah, there's the party. I think I'm going to sit down, And so when you see the light bulb go off in his head, they're all kind of looking at each other, trying not to.
Don't want to get blamed on them.
Trying not to get blamed and trying not to give it away. And he gets over and he looks at it, and they're just, you could see the anticipation, and he goes through that thing, and they didn't budge. I thought they were going to, they just sat there. And Curtis was like, man, I knew that chair was getting old. And they went on, and they never said a word. And finally I said, are you guys going to tell Curtis what just happened there?
And you finally found out. Now tell me, Curtis, what's one thing you admire about Bob?
Just that, look, we are politically 180 degrees apart from each other, but I know the dude's got a good heart, and I know that he would always be there if I ever needed him. And even though we disagree on some things, it's like, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now, Bob, what do you admire about Curtis?
It's the same thing. I mean, he's just a good dude. I mean, I'm not. Curtis loses his shit sometimes. That's just who he is. But that in there's a good. It's basically he's just a good dude.
You have the unenviable task of being my big brother.
I am. Yeah, I have sort of been his big brother. I mean, there was a time when I was away in the Navy. I think it's probably when he was most off the rails.
So let's talk about the off the rails. You got to understand the way. And I'm not making excuses. It's on me. But the way my cycling career got launched was Bob and I met at a roller race in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. It was a January day. It's like 70 degrees. We start riding. Well, within a year, Major Taylor Velodrome opens, and I go into a race, and I'm racing with Gil Hatton, Mark Whitehead, Roger Young, Danny Van. I mean, the nastiest. So I got taught the nastiest stuff that you can, and it was like those guys would knock you on your butt and go eat lunch. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was normal course of doing business. I come to a spring training race and pull that stuff. People are not so cool with
it. Now, which one of you is aging better?
Bob. I think we're both doing pretty damn good.
Yeah. So who could drink the other one under the table?
I could outdrink him. That's an easy one.
Yeah. Now, in terms of cycling or light or whatever, what is it you have left to accomplish?
Right across the United States.
Yeah, that's one thing we did say.
We do want to do that.
We do. I mean, and
you're in.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And I think what I'd like, they've got, and I need to explore it more. Right now, they've got a Trans-Canada trail.
Yeah, we may do it in Canada.
But they're talking about putting this Trans-America trail. I don't know if you've seen stuff on social media, but that looks like one that we may be dead by the time they actually get and I don't want to do it. I mean, it used to be I'd have done it on back roads. I mean, we did some long trips before, but I'm too old. I'm too nervous to do that. But if they get that trail.
We did 860 miles in 4.5 days one time.
We did a lot of, but and we did it with maps and we didn't realize how dangerous it was.
Yeah, when you're young, you don't know.
We left Louisville. We rode to Pine Knot, Kentucky the first day, Knoxville, Tennessee the second day, Pound, Virginia the third day, because on the first day, his brother flipped on us, and so 25% of our money went back. So our hotel plan kind of took a dive. So and then from Pound, Virginia to Lexington, and then Lexington home.
Wow.
Lexington home felt like one lap of Cherokee Park after those 4 days before that.
But I think overall, just keeping it up. I mean, at this point, there aren't any. I'd like to get Will through college and those sorts of things. I'd really like to see, him, continue to ride a bike. I mean, the racing is gravy.
Yeah.
I hope he has a great college racing experience, but more importantly, just to be where we are right now and still enjoy getting on his bike and doing that kind of stuff. I mean, that's really the only goal.
What's one accomplishment you've given up on?
Man, I don't know. The way this summer went, I'm maybe racing. I mean, at this point, I'm just focused. We've got 3 or 4 guys that have a shot at the Olympic team, and I'm all chips in helping them.
Yeah.
I mean, I threw in the towel on racing 10 years ago, so I don't think I'm not giving up on the Crossing the America thing. I guess I'm holding on to that one. So,
over the years, who have you really enjoyed riding with the most, and why?
I would put JT up there pretty high, just because he's probably the funniest guy we've ever ridden with.
Yeah. I mean, the whole group. I mean, there's guys that. I mean, Mandrola. I mean, he just brings a little levity to the group. Sometimes not intentionally. John May. I mean, Swope. Anybody. I mean.
Yeah, we're going to leave a bunch of people.
Yeah,
out.
I mean, no, but I mean, just the people that I mean, I've gotten to know, Carlos Fish. I didn't know Carlos from, Adam. And, he's a good dude. And, we don't talk a ton, but it's like just nice to have those. It's a good group of folks. Like, rarely do I look and say, there are a couple of people I'm like,
Well, if they're switched on enough to go ride, 3 hours a couple times a weekend, then, they're probably okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's like I said, top to bottom, the, best group of people. I mean, all of my networking, I don't network, but I know. I mean, I know a billionaire.
Oh yeah.
I know all kind of doctors. If somebody gets there, I can get in. I can make a phone call. I mean,
the perplexing thing is, why did those guys find us interesting?
I know.
That's really. If you ever sit there and
Yeah.
think of it in those terms, it's pretty weird.
And I used to think when I quit racing, that was a big issue. It's like, and I think Curtis is on the cusp of that now. And I've told him 100 times, like, it was a huge part of my life. So I didn't want to lose it, but I knew it needed to go. And I thought that somehow nobody calls me Bob. Everybody calls me Bob-ro. My closer Curtis calls me, my really close friends call me Bob. Everybody in the group calls me Bob-ro. I was worried that Bob-ro would go away. That somehow, well, you don't race anymore. You're slower than me now. That somehow the respect would go away, or somehow the identity would go away. But
your Will's dad.
Yeah, I'm Will dad. That's true. I am Will's dad. That gives me some cred. But generally speaking, I mean, you've built your reputation, and that's not going to change. So it's shift gears but do whatever you want.
Well, the problem I'm reaching, I don't really want to quit racing, but truth be told, I'm not good enough to race the races that I still find interesting anymore. And so I ended up racing really, 55 at 55, I always wondered, why is there no 55? You go to 55 race and there's, 30 guys there. Why? That's a big one, Well, because they're all broken, just like I'm becoming broken, It's like it's just not that interesting to ride around with 10 guys on a typical, it's just not that much fun. So I guess I'm just going to ride on the vine or whatever.
And don't you see, most of the fast guys are guys that came to it much later. It's still fresh for them. It's still new. I mean, I was bored with racing bikes. I'd been wanting to quit for several years.
They've not experienced real bike racing,
right?
Nighttime cage matches with 150 guys. But you can only, you can sort of only do it so long, and then
you do conversation rides.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it's, just keeping that mental tenacity up too.
And I think it's sort of there is, even on a slow group ride, even we rotate down River Road on the route rides every morning, and it's a 23 mile an hour rotation. Mm-hmm. There's still something about that. Synergy is the only word I can really come up with, mm-hmm. that just feels, it's just a cooperative, people know what they're doing and you're getting something done. That still feels kind of racy. Yeah. And it's enough.
Well, and you find those moments where you go, man, this feels pretty good. Then you go out on Tuesday night and go, man, this sucks.
It's all relative though, right? I mean, if you're rotating with a bunch of guys who are maxed out at 23, it's like, it's fun. Yeah. Then you get, somebody who wants to go 30, it's like, oh yeah, it's a different game. That fantasy's over.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a tag team octagon with spouses. Who's going to win?
Tag team octagon. What's the contest?
Like an octagon wrestling match. Full UFC octagon.
If I could stay away from Curtis long enough, but if he gets a hold of me at the beginning,
this is tag team with spouses.
Oh, tag team? Yeah. I think Marla and Tracy would be a wash because Tracy is like tough, but she's like awful breakable.
She's like a Dorito, though. Just like she's just gonna snap.
She's gonna snap.
Yeah.
I think if it was an octagon tag team, they'd both sit over there and drink some wine and say, "Screw you, you're not tagging us in."
And we play cornhole.
You started, we play cornhole.
No thanks, I'm done.
And by the way, we are probably going to win the worlds in cornhole next.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're pretty damn good together.
Yeah, we do a pretty good job.
We may have to. We may have to call you on that one.
And just for the record, we play cornhole exactly like we race bikes. I'm the explosive one, and he's just steady.
Yeah, I'm defense. I mean, I'm
on the board every time.
Every single time.
In the yard and in the hole every now and then.
No, he definitely shoots for the hole, and it's like if we're playing against each other, it's like I need that first shot.
Yeah.
And if I blow the first shot, I'm in trouble.
He builds a little dam.
We just build it. It's like you'll see it at the end. There's like 10 bags right in front of the hole and not one of them in.
All right. So who you guys want to thank tonight?
Wow. Just obviously, my wife. I don't know. What are we thanking them for specifically?
Hey, whatever you want to thank for.
I'm just happy to be here, dude. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole crew, Bob, my wife, obviously, Marla. I knew Marla before I knew Bob.
That's true.
So she used to take tickets at the skating rink, and I would hand her my money and go skate.
Yeah.
And then she'd kick me out later.
What about you, Bob?
Thank you for having us again. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the big folks, family, friends. I mean, since this is a group ride thing, I like to thank the people that show up to the rides.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, it makes riding fun. Like I say, I really, especially when it's nasty outside, it's not that much fun to ride by myself. I used to be able to do it a lot more. I just don't like it. So all the folks that, put up with whatever to do the rides. I mean, and Curtis for when I'm going to be hungover and not going to make an 8 o'clock ride for taking over and calling an audible.
Apparently that wasn't popular. No one told
me. No, it was fine. It was a very good ride. It was very fun. It was just, yeah. But, and I do have to, my only kind of concern tonight is if this episode ends up being the top downloaded episode, is this really going to count as beating the Bob Bobrow episode?
I don't know.
Since you're on this one again?
I don't know.
That would make him 2-time champ.
That would make me 2-time champ.
Yeah.
It's kind of like 2-pump chump, only just different.
And on that note, yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for not only being here on the podcast tonight, but for everything you do for cycling in our community, because there's a certain core of people who have been here for a long time and done a lot of great work, and there's a lot of fast guys who ride bikes a lot that have been influenced by the two of you all.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody for showing up. I mean, we do get a lot out of it. It's not like it's some philanthropy or something.
Yeah. That's our goal.
Because we just like to do it.
Right. We like to ride.
Anybody that wants to come, cool.
And that's going off. I mean, we both think we're smarter than anybody on the earth. So, so you're helping us. You're helping us, letting us teach you how smart.
Only one of you can be right.
That's
you're the smartest person.
Usually we agree, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all.
All right. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Louisville Cycling Podcast. If you aren't a subscriber yet, then head on over to your favorite podcast player and hit that subscribe button now. It's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode. And do you know this isn't my only podcast? Find out more about my other shows at my website, barrygary.com. That's BARRYGARY.com. You can also leave ideas about future episodes and other feedback at that site. Well, that's it for this episode of the Louisville Cycling Podcast, but I'll be back soon with more reasons why Louisville and the surrounding area is a great place to ride a bike. Right now, though, I think it's time to get out and go for a ride.